The sound of the USS Enterprise was not a mechanical hum. It was a tectonic grinding. It was the sensation of 20,000 tons of steel fighting the Pacific Ocean. A vibration that traveled up through the rivets of the flight deck and settled into the teeth of Lieutenant Commander Wade "Dusty" McCluskey. It was June 4, 1942. The air temperature was 70 degrees. But inside the ready room, it felt like a blast furnace, thick with the smell of stale coffee, cigarette smoke, and the sour, electric sweat of 30 men who knew they were about to die. Dusty's normal was a state of controlled suffocation. He was 39 years old, an Annapolis man with a hairline that was receding as fast as the American naval perimeter. His war wasn't fought with anger. It was fought with fuel mixtures and navigation plot boards. He lived his life in gallons per hour. His fragility lay in the instrument panel of his dauntless dive bomber. Every gauge was a potential liar, every needle a harbinger of a long swim in a shark-infested ocean. He didn't fear the Japanese zeros as much as he feared the empty white space on his chart, where the ocean simply swallowed you whole. He sat in the front row of the briefing, staring at the teletype readout pinned to the blackboard. The chalk dust hung in the air, motes dancing in the yellow light of the naked bulbs. The intelligence officer, a man named Layton, who looked like he hadn't slept since Pearl Harbor, was tapping a grid square on the map. "The target is the Keto Butai," Layton said, his voice cracking with exhaustion. "For carriers, Akagi Kaga, Hiryu Soryu. They are 200 miles northwest. We have a sighting from a PBY Catalina at 5:30. Dusty wrote the coordinates on his knee pad, 30 Tekken. 180 W. That was the anchor. The fact, the X that marked the spot. They are heading for Midway," Layton continued. "Course 135, speed 25 knots. You will intercept them at 9:20 hours. Do not engage the escorts. Put your bombs on the flight decks. If you miss, the war is over by Tuesday." The room was silent, save for the scratching of pencils. This was the machinery of survival, reducing the apocalypse to a math problem. Course, speed, distance, fuel, Dusty walked out onto the flight deck at 7 o'clock. The noise hit him. Like a physical blow, the roar of radial engines warming up. The scream of the wind over the bow. The shouted curses of the plane captains in their color-coded jerseys. The Enterprise was turning into the wind, heaving through the swells. He climbed onto the wing of his SBD Dauntless. His rear gunner, a kid named Chappie who chewed gum to stop his teeth chattering, gave him a thumbs up. "Ready to make history, Skipper?" Chappie yelled over the prop wash. "I'd settle for making it back for lunch," Dusty shouted back. He strapped in. The cockpit smelled of leather, hydraulic fluid, and fear. He plugged in his radio cord. The static hissed in his ears, the sound of the ionosphere. Indifferent to their fate, they launched at 7:06, one by one. The heavy bombers lumbered down the wooden deck, dipping dangerously low over the water before clawing for altitude. Dusty led the formation of 33 planes, climbing slowly, heavily. Burdened by the 1,000-pound bombs, slung under their bellies, they formed up at 20,000 feet. The world up here was deceptively peaceful. The ocean was a vast, textured sheet of blue enamel, broken only by the whitecaps of the trade winds. The sky was a brutal, blinding azure. Dusty checked his fuel gauge. It was the only instrument that mattered. The Dauntless was a thirsty beast. They were pushing the limits of their range. Every minute they flew northwest was a minute they couldn't fly back. They flew for an hour in silence. Radio silence was absolute. The only sound was the drone of the right cyclone engine, a hypnotic, brumming vibration that numbed the hands and the mind. Dusty checked his watch. 9:15. They were close, according to the math coordinates on his knee pad. The speed of the Japanese fleet, the wind vector the enemy, should be directly ahead. He scanned the horizon. He looked for the telltale smudges of smoke, He looked for the white wakes of 100 ships. He saw nothing. 9:20 came and went. The ocean was empty. This was the disturbance. The precise, factual disturbance, the X on the map, the coordinate 30-second. 180W was a lie. Or rather, it was a truth that had expired. The Japanese fleet wasn't there. Dusty banked his plane left, then right, scanning the vast, empty bowl of the Pacific. 33 bombers followed him. 33 pilots looking at their fuel gauges, then at the empty sea. Then at him, the convoy of the enemy fleet had never arrived at the intercept. Point confusion began to bleed into the cockpit. Had the intelligence been wrong? Had the PBY sighting been a ghost? Or had the Japanese changed course? If they had changed course, where were they? The instability of human judgment under pressure began to manifest. Dusty's fuel was dropping. He had enough to search for maybe 10 more minutes before he had to turn back or risk ditching. The normal of the mission plan had evaporated. He was now leading 33 men and 33,000 pounds of high explosives into a void. He keyed his mic, breaking radio silence. Box leader to formation. No contact. Expanding search sector box. Stay tight. He heard the tension and the clicks of the mics, acknowledging him. They were scared. Not of the enemy, but of the emptiness. Dusty looked at his plotboard. If the Japanese weren't here, they must have turned. But which way? North, retreating. South, attacking the carriers. East. He made a decision rooted in instinct, not math. He decided to fly beyond the intercept point. He decided to fly deeper into the fuel danger zone. 9:35. Still nothing. The needle on the fuel gauge quivered near the return mark. 9:45. The ocean remained, a blank slate. Dusty felt the sweat running down his back, cold and sticky. He was failing. He was leading the air group to their deaths in the water without ever dropping a bomb. The fatigue of the morning, the stress of the launch, the weight of the warrant all pressed down on his chest. And then, at 9:55, he saw it. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't a carrier. It was a single, thin white line drawn on the blue surface of the water, miles below. Awake, he banked the Dauntless to get a better look. At the tip of the white line was a tiny gray speck. A single ship. A destroyer. It was moving fast. Northeast Dusty's mind raced. Why was a single destroyer running at high speed in the middle of nowhere? A destroyer doesn't run alone unless it's going somewhere important, or coming from somewhere important. It must have been lagging behind, maybe hunting a submarine, and was now rushing to catch up with the main body. The destroyer was the breadcrumb. Follow that ship, Dusty whispered to himself. He signaled the turn. The formation wheeled, following the line of the white wake. They followed the destroyer for 10 agonizing minutes. The fuel gauges were now dipping below the safety margin. They were committed. If this destroyer led to nothing, they would all swim. At 10:02, the horizon changed. It didn't burn. Its smoked black oily smudges appeared on the rim of the world. Then, the shapes. Tiny, toy-like rectangles scattered across the sea. The Keto Butai. Dusty felt a jolt of electricity that banished the fatigue. There they were, 4 of them. Massive, flat-topped beasts, turning into the wind. The Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, the Hiryu, and something was wrong down there. The Japanese ships were scattering. They were maneuvering violently. The water around them was churned white. Puffs of black flak were peppering the sky, but ... low. Very low. Dusty realized what was happening. The American torpedo bombers, the slow, low-flying devastators from Hornet and Yorktown, had arrived first. They had found the fleet by luck or tragedy, and they were being slaughtered. He could see the splashes of the planes hitting the water. He could see the Japanese Zero fighters swarming down on the deck, chasing the torpedo planes like angry wasps. The Japanese Combat Air Patrol, their defensive shield, was entirely focused on the deck level. They weren't looking up. The sky above the carriers, at 20,000 feet, was empty. The disturbance of the empty ocean had led Dusty to arrive at the exact, miraculous second when the enemy's guard was down. The Japanese decks were cluttered with planes refueling and rearming to strike the American fleet. Bombs and torpedoes were stacked on the decks. Fuel hoses were snake-like lines of hazard. It was a powder keg waiting for a match. Dusty checked his altimeter. 19,000 feet. He didn't need to give an order. The pilots behind him saw it. The machinery of survival shifted from search mode to kill mode. "Dick," Dusty said to his wingman. "Dick Best, you take the near carrier. I'll take the far one." There was a moment of confusion, miscommunication in the hand signals and, for a terrifying heartbeat. It looked like the entire squadron was going to dive on the same ship, leaving the others untouched. But Best, seeing the error, violently pulled his section away, targeting the Akagi while Dusty took the Kaga. Dusty pushed the stick forward. The nose of the Dauntless dropped. The horizon flipped vertical. The engine whine rose to a scream as the dive brakes extended. Gravity took over. He was falling toward the Kaga at 240 knots, then 270. The carrier grew in his windscreen. He could see the huge red rising sun painted on the flight deck. He could see the tiny figures of the deck crew freezing, looking up, realizing too late that the sky was falling. The Zero fighters, thousands of feet below, couldn't climb fast enough. The flak guns couldn't elevate fast enough. It was 4 minutes of physics. Elevate fast enough. It was 4 minutes of physics.